right. Well, first of all, thank you guys for sitting down and talking with me. I'm really excited to talk to you guys. I spent all week binging and catching up on your guys' show.
I mean, as far as They Might Be Giants podcasts go, ours is the easiest one to catch up on.
It took me probably 5 days as opposed to the other ones, which took me like 3 weeks. So thank you for the brevity, at least. All right, and for those who don't know your podcast, would you like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Trevor, one of the two hosts of Giants Confirmed, They Might Be Giants Fancast.
And I'm Matt. I'm Matt Rivera, the other host of Giants Confirmed.
All right, and I think the first question to start with, the most basic question, also for people who haven't listened to your guys' show, is how did you get into They Might Be Giants?
Well, I would say I initially got into their music via one of my friends giving me a compilation back when I was in like high school or middle school. It was like the user's guide. But I got into like the band itself on like a deeper level once I discovered This Might Be a Wiki, the like online database of like lyrics and trivia and histories of all their songs.
For me, it was like I was on a fan forum for the band Lemon Demon. So music by Neil Cicierega, a guy who made The Ultimate Showdown, Potter Puppet Pals, Brody Quest, a lot of really like seminal web videos. and of course his mashup albums, which are his like most recent popular thing. And of course, like there's a huge crossover between the fandom of that band and They Might Be Giants. So basically everyone on the forum already listened to them. My first They Might Be Giants CD was User's Guide. That was the first one I grabbed. And then from there, I ended up grabbing all the other albums eventually. And Trevor was the one who approached me with the idea of doing the podcast because he knew I'd been like really into the band for a while. And he wanted to like kind of approach it from a longtime fan, newer fan dichotomy. So that's the kind of energy we go for with the podcast episodes.
Mm-hmm. And I like how there's
classic
like
format.
been 2 albums that I've noticed that most people, or actually 3 albums that get everyone into it. It's either Flood, User's Guide, or Then the Early Years.
Yeah.
It's always those 3.
Pretty much.
Flood was definitely the first like studio album that I appreciated too. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
I'm a big Lincoln fan. So
Lincoln's always my number one. So.
Yeah, it's just so good.
It's perfect.
I have friends I've been trying to get into They Might Be Giants and unsuccessfully. And I always just say, just listen to Lincoln first, please. Mm-hmm. And then they never do. Or they listen to one song and they're like, I don't know how I feel about this.
What, did they start on Santa's Beard?
No, they start on The World's Address and it goes all downhill from there.
No.
Yeah.
I always think of trying to get people into Lincoln always just reminds me of the anecdote from the 33 and a third book about neutral milk hotels in the airplane over the sea. So Julian Coster, who has played singing saw for They Might Be Giants before, every time it was his turn to pick music, he'd put on Lincoln, and the entire rest of the band hated it. And so he would just listen to it every single time it was his turn in this 4-person band. He would throw on Lincoln. So every 4 CDs they listened to was Lincoln.
I mean,
and that's how I be too.
I think I play Lincoln like in its entirety at least 3 times a week. So it's like one of those things that's already etched into my head. Yeah. And I tried playing Purple Toupee for my friend, and she just kind of went like, "Yeah, this seems like some weird shit you'd be into," and then just dismissed it.
Yeah.
But do you guys remember like your sort of initial reaction to They Might Be Giants?
Trevor, I'll let you go first on this one.
My initial reaction, I probably the first time I heard them, I didn't even know I was hearing them, because the first time I heard them was definitely like Malcolm in the Middle or like one of the Tiny Toons segments. But I definitely like remember like hearing those songs and those cartoons and enjoying them. I guess they never like really spurred me to go check out who was the author of them, but I mean, positive reactions for sure.
Yeah, for me, it would have also probably been Malcolm in the Middle. Not only the theme song, but also just like they did the incidental music for like the whole first season. Some original stuff, some of their like existing songs. I know, I don't think I ever really saw the Tiny Toon stuff as a kid, just, different channels up in Canada, so I don't think it came up quite as often. But I do remember seeing the music video for Boss of Me on Much Music, MTV equivalent, and it's like, it features, people from Malcolm in the Middle, so I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But for me, it was mostly like I was getting into them from the perspective of being someone who primarily listened to music from video games until I was on the forum for Lemon Demon and was like, being introduced to other stuff. And there was a point where like my iTunes library was 2/3 either They Might Be Giants or Lemon Demon. Like it's basically where I started listening to music on my own that wasn't like coming from the radio, coming from my older siblings, anything like that. It was the first time I'd really branched out on my own. So it's like, I don't even have like a reaction perspective because it was just like, it was formative. It was where I started listening to music. So it's almost like everything that I've listened to since is in reaction to having listened to They Might Be Giants first.
It was kind of like a comet crashing.
Yeah, kind of.
It sounds like.
It's interesting that so many people get exposed to them as young children through those cartoons and stuff like that, because I feel like even when I returned to the band like later as a teen, like getting like the compilation and stuff, I remember a distinct feeling that I maybe wasn't old enough to appreciate it. Like there was a kind of like postmodern element to it that I was able to recognize at that point. And it would not be until like I would get more into the band as an adult that I like really fully appreciated that, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Which isn't to say like that their stuff can't be enjoyed by all ages. That's like one of the great things about it. There are levels to it.
Yeah, that's why I think like thinking of something like use Purple Toupee as an example since it's already come up. It just sounds like a song with silly lyrics when you're a kid and you're not getting like the myriad of like broken pop culture references they're making in that song. I'm glad that I figured
Absolutely.
I'm glad I figured out that Chinese people were fighting in the park was about the Vietnam War, because that line always kind of made me uncomfortable before. Because it just seems like a weird thing to say.
Yeah, I heard it the first time because I didn't hear anything off of Lincoln when I was younger. Like I'm still pretty fresh hearing it now as like an adult. So I kind of got some of the pop culture references, but I was like, Linnell, what are you talking about, man? It just perplexed me. But they're definitely even in their kids' albums, because I mean, I never heard those growing up. I'm a little bit younger. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I heard them in Malcolm in the Middle and definitely their Disney theme song stuff. Mm-hmm. And then Coraline, which when Linnell did that solo. But it even then, when I first heard that, it still always struck me as like really postmodern and kind of odd. Like I like that they kind of have that element in every like that's an element that's never been lost on them.
Yeah, because they like follow a strong breadth of musical styles. Like they're kind of all over the place stylistically, but I feel like lyrically they're always on some weird postmodern shit.
It's very deep.
And as fun and like breezy sometimes as their material can be, they really are a band that I think are like best appreciated when like you sit down with them like in an academic sense. Yeah,
I mean that's what we all podcast about, right?
It's just like the biggest like research study program, but it's like all about one band.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you guys and before you guys kind of do your episodes, which are just primarily dissections of the albums, do you do any like prior research or anything, or do you just kind of like listen to it and then go into the album?
We take like a two-pronged approach to it, I feel like. Yeah. I'm like a more recent fan, so a lot of it is like coming at me for the first time, and I find that it helps me to like spend a lot of time like going through the wiki and like reading about these songs, whereas Matt, who's like lived with them for a longer period of time, he's like been exposed to all that trivia over the course of years and years. So it's all buried in there and he can like draw it when he needs it. So I don't think he spends quite as much time preparing for the episodes as I do.
I definitely, I kind of go into it. I'll do one, maybe two listens if it's one of the shorter albums. I will at least run through the trivia pages, the trivia sections of each of the songs on the wiki. And also I'll spend a lot of time on the interpretations page, which has always been like one of my favorite parts of the They Might Be Giants wiki. Because people have a lot of weird ideas of what the songs are about, and I really like to explore that because, like, the Johns say themselves, it's like they have a certain intention when writing a song, but they're very strong proponents of, like, you know, death of the author. Read whatever you want into the songs that you're listening to. Any interpretation is valid, and people really run with that one.
I mean, the whole interpretations page on any song is like a wormhole.
I mean, it's a wormhole on, like, general song lyrics and, like, unlike Genius and stuff like that. Like, another one of my podcasts where we listen to albums that were, I mean, me and Trevor both have different podcasts where we listen to albums that were reviewed well or poorly by Pitchfork. We have two different podcasts that kind of go at the same angle there.
That's one of my favorite facts about us as a duo.
And the going on the Genius pages for those is always a trip. But I think there's something just particular about, one, They Might Be Giants fans in general, and two, the fact that the wiki's been online for like well over 15 years at this point, which is much longer than like any song lyrics website has existed. The band's wiki has existed longer than many like bands themselves have existed. Yeah, like the band's wiki is like, it was like a Wikipedia fork on like the earliest editions of like the MediaWiki software. The fact that it works so well is just like basically a testament to how good the webmasters are. Capital Q and the crew around it. They Might Be Giants. This Might Be a Wiki. It's in the same core team the whole time, and they do a really good job just like making sure it works.
I mean, I can't even imagine archiving all that information because, I mean, I've made it like through 40% of the wiki. Like, I haven't even gone through the entire thing yet, and it's already like an information overload.
Between that and the Miscellaneous Tea Facebook page, I'm still finding out about bootlegs. Like there's bootlegs that I've just never known existed until someone will bring them up in the Facebook group or post about it on the wiki. Like there's so much out there. Like it's really a band that encourages that kind of archival listening, not only just because they've been around for so long, but because they've have so many alternate routes of material, like Dial-A-Song. People are still digging up old Dial-A-Song stuff from people who recorded it on their telephones with like a vacuum microphone, like recording on an old like analog telephone set, recording the songs off of like in the early 90s. Like the technology was around for that. And like people have had these kind of archives like before the internet was big. Like having these kind of files handy in like an analog format, which is nuts. Like the archivists for They Might Be Giants predate the internet, basically.
Yeah, it's so unfathomable how much. I mean, when you guys were like getting into the band, did you feel some sort of like information overload? Because it's like you have the studio releases, you have bootlegs, and then you have like. It's like an onion almost. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, so many layers of music. I'm glad that I got into them. Like it was a little bit before the Else, which is like their longest studio album gap, which was from The Spine in 2004 to The Else in 2007. It's the only time they've gone longer than 2 years, as far as I know, without like any kind of release. Actually, no, one of the children's albums was in there. I'm wrong. There was a different spot. But it was their longest non-children's album gap, I think. Don't fact check me.
It's definitely a little overwhelming, but there's also like, you know, a thrilling aspect to it too, that there's always going to be more stuff to dig into.
Yeah, especially since they became like ludicrously prolific in the last like 5 years. With the two Dial-A-Songs.
It's cool knowing that I could go on like a month's, even year-long They Might Be Giants binge and then kind of put them down for a while, and there will still be tons of new material for me to check out and that I've never heard before, like when I eventually feel like going back.
Yeah, for sure. There's always new stuff to find because they're always putting stuff out.
Yeah, it's like I just imagine them having like a Dr. Seuss like factory where they just like throw ideas in a thing and it's always going on, going and going and going.
Yeah, like I've always wanted to know like what their editing process is like, because it really seems like if they're throwing anything out, how do they even put out this much material?
I just want to know what like the inside of their brains are like. Honestly,
you get a little idea of Flans, but not too much.
No,
just from his posting on social media.
Oh, he loves posting on social media.
I imagine Flansburgh's brain is like a wacky cartoon and Linnell's is more like some kind of abstract painting or something.
Yeah.
That's what he wants you to think too.
That's true.
he's like the greatest manipulator. I'm gonna make you think this thing about me that's not true, or is it?
Exactly. He needs to retain his mystery.
I know, and that's what's so appealing. Do you think there's like that sort of mysterious element to They Might Be Giants, and that's kind of also why they're so like appealing?
Definitely, because I mean, as evidenced by like all the different interpretations on the wiki, like it's so hard to figure out sometimes exactly what they're getting at, and that's like a big part of the appeal too.
I think to a certain point, they're just kind of like weird guys that kind of they kind of just struck a chord with the right kind of people, and they've managed to be allowed to continue being weird guys for going on like 35-40 years. I guess we're getting up there in numbers. But like, yeah, they're just now they're weird dads.
They went from like weird art students to like grumpy weird Brooklyners, and now they're just one grumpy old man and one grumpy dad.
Yeah. They're grumpy senior citizens.
Oh god, they are senior citizens technically. And besides like that sort of element of mystery, because they keep everything pretty vague, do you also think like the more humorous leaning at like elements that could be like leaning towards humor, do you also think that's kind of like another appealing factor that draws people into the band?
Yeah, and I think it definitely kind of humanizes like the more like oblique elements of their music and makes it a lot more accessible than it would be otherwise.
I do
like there's one thing about a band like doing all this weird stuff and making all these weird references, but like there's something that makes it go down a lot easier if they can also make you laugh at the same time.
I do know it rubs them the wrong way when you refer to them as a novelty band, or even refer to them as a comedy band. It's not really a scene that they seem to feel particularly comfortable with. Mostly because I think...
Which is totally understandable.
Yeah, well, it's like, they're art school kids, right? That's the milieu that they kind of find themselves in. But what happened is, like, they didn't really end up with the art school kids as far as the people who like their music a lot. Like, I feel like they if they didn't continue getting play on Dr. Demento, they definitely did in the early years. And there's definitely comparisons to Weird Al that have been made that I don't think they found very flattering when they happened, but I think they've kind of grown with now. Like the Weird Al They Might Be Giant style parody, Everything You Know Is Wrong. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of anecdotes about it having rubbed them the wrong way when it first came out.
Because I think I remember Flan saying like, I don't want to listen to that. Like it made him like kind of uncomfortable. Yeah. That was the vibe I kind of got from what he said. I always ask because, like, I show people my age who are all, like, art school kids, They Might Be Giants, and they mostly either, like, laugh at it or think it's, like, for lack of a better term, lame. And so... And
I mean, what you got to know about art school kids is that none of them are actually cool. They all like to think they're very cool. Yeah,
that's the other thing.
Once they all get over themselves, they'll be into They Might Be Giants.
Yeah, let's hope so. And what's, like, in your guys' opinion, like, the worst label you've kind of seen attached to them over the years? Because some of them are pretty bad.
Definitely, like, nerd rock, nerdcore. Not a fan of that one.
Dork rock.
Yeah, dork rock.
I've listened to enough nerdcore that I can't fully denigrate it as a genre, as embarrassing as that is to admit. I think the worst thing that I could see them labeled with is people who, like... associate them primarily with, like, you know, basement dwelling incel nerd tropes, which I don't think is anything that particularly sticks to them lately, but something that might have been more common in, like, the 90s and maybe like the early 2000s.
I've never seen that labeled attached to them.
Yeah, it's because like that's primarily like that's the kind of label that you'd attach to music that 4chan's really into now. But I feel like the time that they would have fit that mold would have been pre-4chan.
I can see that. I've never heard that. I just think dork rock's really bad because it's like that's so vague, and that
I think it's kind of condescending too. Dork rock, geek rock, anything of that ilk. Mostly because they don't identify with it themselves. Because, like, if you called Jonathan Colton geek rock, you'd be like, yeah, I wrote 2 songs for Portal Of course I'm geek rock. Like,
and even calling them a novelty act, because the thing is whenever I listen to They Might Be Giants, I always just think, like, just you can tell there's, like, so much dedication put into every single piece of a song that you're like, this isn't a novelty. Like, they're having fun with it, but it's like, you know, they're taking it it's almost like too seriously constructed to be taken as a novelty.
The only way I could see you coming to that conclusion is if the first two songs you heard were Istanbul and Why Does the Sun Shine? Because those have because both of those songs were written in the 50s. So
yeah, and I mean, I heard Istanbul, I didn't hear it until I was 18, and I mean, I even still thought, I'm like, this is, like, kind of cool, you know?
Oh, yeah,
like,
totally
this isn't,
whips.
like, novelty. Yeah, and then it's like you got a dude yodeling in the background, and it's Flansburgh, and then you see him do it live, and it's, like, even better. And then they start screaming whenever they play it live.
Oh, yeah. And they have that, like, extended guitar intro that Danny Miller and Danny Weinkauf do.
Oh, and it's so good.
The Electric
it's
Istanbul.
So
I'm really glad they put that on a studio release.
Is that the one where they did it with the Speak and Spell?
I think
as the
so.
Intro?
Either way, any alt versions of songs that they do live, I mean, like, that's why you're going to the shows, right? You want to hear the weird shit. If they just played the hits every time, then people wouldn't, like, I have so many friends that just follow their tours around.
Yeah,
I think when I saw them do Istanbul, they sang it like pirates, like they turned it into a sea shanty or something.
And I think a couple of times they've done them with they've done that song with the puppets too.
Mm-hmm. How many times have you guys seen them live?
I've only seen them once. I did have a ticket to go see them late 2020 before the pandemic kicked off, but I don't know when that's going to happen now.
Yeah, it's like I'm glad the 2020 shows all got delayed because I didn't get tickets to any of them yet because I wasn't sure if I was able to get anywhere. Like when it was still like a possibility that I could go somewhere in 2020. And I had, kind of delayed it enough times, and then they all recently just got delayed again because they were originally just delayed till the fall. But now they've just been pushed entirely to the unknown future. But let's see. I saw them for the first time in Detroit in 2011. I saw them after that in the end of 2012. I saw them twice because they were playing a run of 3 shows running up to New Year's at Music Hall of Williamsburg. And then I saw them in Toronto 2 times, I think. I don't know why I can't remember this right now, but I'm pretty sure I've seen them in Toronto twice. Because they actually come through Canada now. Because when I first got into the band, the only show that they played in Ontario was at a 19-plus bar, and I was 16, so there was no way I could get into that one. And then the next time they played in Canada was a free show in like 2012 for one of their children's albums, and I was working during the day, and I was working like 4 hours north of there. So I couldn't go to that either. So their first proper show they played in Ontario, again, I was right there, and then I will go see them anytime they come into Ontario since.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm still like waiting to see them for the first time. And when you guys saw them for the first time, was it like something that got you even more into the
absolutely.
band?
And like I was already someone who was traveling several hours to see them across a border. So, like, there was already a pretty high level of dedication there.
I enjoyed the show that I saw, but it happened during my, like, mid-period of being, like, a fan of They Might Be Giants, but not into them to the point where I would start a podcast about them. And I just kind of, like, had a positive experience, and I was like, yeah, that was a cool concert.
I just really like that they mostly play without openers and functionally open for themselves. So you just get, like, a really long set of what you pay for. That's something that I really appreciate in my older age, where I can't just like be at a show for like 4 hours while 3 different bands play. Or else
your patience is just zero.
No, my feet will start hurting. If it's not a seated show, I just want to go home. But the first time I saw them, they actually did have an opener, and it was Jonathan Colton.
Oh, that sounds fun. I love Jonathan
and
Colton,
actually,
too.
You know what? The New Year's shows at Music Hall of Williamsburg also had openers. I got to see 2 of the openers. One of them was Cornmow, and the other was whatever Flansburgh's wife's band's name is. I don't know what they're called, but it's Flans's wife's band. I I missed the New Year's Eve show because I was somewhere else at the time, and that's when Moonhooch played, and I'm really mad I missed them because they're apparently like the most legendary They Might Be Giants opener at this point. Like, people will respond more to that music than to They Might Be Giants, and you know how They Might Be Giants fans are.
That must make them really bummed.
They are so good. And I haven't actually managed to see them live yet, but I feel like they'd be an incredible experience. Because, you know, like, if they're picking an opener, they're really serious about that opener. Because otherwise it's like, They won't have one. They'll just tour on their own because they can.
Mm-hmm. And with doing a podcast about They Might Be Giants, do you feel like your love, adoration, whatever you'd like to call it, has changed or, like, increased, decreased? Just, like, how has it changed, if you think it has, since starting the podcast?
Every time we review an album, my appreciation of it, like, grows in leaps and bounds. Like, something we do at the end of every episode is, like, I provide, like, an abbreviated track list of the record we've discussed, where I kind of trim the fat and just, like, break it down to, like, a 10-track thing. But, like, after we record and I've, like, spent all this time, like, going through these songs, I, like, return to the albums and I find it difficult to cut anything. Like, I can't imagine them without, like, all these songs.
Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't even cut You'll Miss Me from Lincoln at this point. Like, that's where I'm at with my appreciation.
Now that's dedication.
But, like, for me,
and sure enough, like, every time we, like, review an album, there's always, like, every episode there is a song that I go on record as, like, not really enjoying and saying I would cut. And then, like, the day after the episode comes out, I, like, am in love with that song and, like, can't
literally
stand
just
to, like,
from doing
hear
the clip in the edit.
Yeah.
For me, it's like when we were doing the episodes more regularly, I think I was in, like, a really high period of my like for the band. I think I've kind of leveled off a bit just because at this point in my life, I'm just not listening to music as much. Like, I've just become, like, a really, really avid podcast listener, which has, you know, changed my consumption habits a little bit when it comes to music. But, like, there'll always be something that's, like, really... There'll always be really, like, important for me as, like, a really formative band. And, like, I'll go back and listen to stuff. I have so much of their stuff on vinyl that I can just spin on the record player anytime. There's a They Might Be Giants poster directly behind me right now saying that says Science is Real on it.
Love that.
So I'm unfortunately not also wearing a They Might Be Giants shirt to go with that, but that's because I'm unemployed, and so I'm wearing a very, very comfy pajama shirt instead.
I feel that so hard. And I also like that you said that you'd want to cut the song from the album and then you go back and listen to it and enjoy it. And that reminded me when I was talking to Greg from This Might Be a Podcast. I think I said that I just despised Particle Man. Just think it's so, like, such an obnoxious song. And then I listened to it like a week later and I went, damn it, why did I go on the record with that?
The group
I really like it. I
think the last big one that I turned around on was, like, Snail Shell. Like, we did the John Henry episode and I was like, I don't really like this song that much. I don't get it. And then, like, our guest Dave, like, went in this great interpretation of it. And, like, ever since I've been like, oh, this is an essential They Might Be Giants single. Like, it belongs on any best of they would ever issue, for sure.
That's such a good song.
There's so much they do
I've
on
always
that
loved
track.
That song.
That's, like... Because, you know, the whole thing about that being the first album with a live band on it, and they're like, we're not going to just waste this. We're going to get vocal effects in there. We're going to get, like, horns in there. We're going to get, like, drum sounds that are panning across the stereo. We're going to get weird with it, and then we're going to make our first single a song called fucking Snail Shell.
And
I respect that
and
artistry.
All the fans are like, yes. I didn't realize until listening to you guys' show that SEXXY was such, like, a controversial song in the fan group. I didn't realize.
Oh my god! At all. When because I think that song is on User's Guide, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's, like, on most of the comps.
Which, like, that always has blown me away as a decision. It's such a weird one.
It was the debut single. It was the opener for the album. Yeah, it's a strange pick.
It's a strange pick.
I've always liked that song. I know it's not cool, but that's why I like it.
Well, yeah, I think we said in the episode it was one of the least cool things they've ever made. And that's saying a lot for a band that has a 50s novelty song about the sun that's in their regular repertoire.
And has a song that absolutely kills about manatees. I mean...
Oh, yeah.
And when you talk to, like, other people who maybe are, like, somewhat familiar with They Might Be Giants or don't know them, how do you, like... This is going to be very tough, so I apologize. How do you kind of describe them? Like, do you have, like, an elevator pitch?
I definitely like tend to throw around the phrase like postmodern a lot. Recently, I found myself comparing them a lot to Steely Dan, which will like make sense to some people and not make sense to others. But they're just, you know, a duo of like very talented musicians and songwriters kind of doing something artsy and postmodern and approaching songwriting and music appreciation from like a different angle.
Now I'm trying to imagine They Might Be Giants doing dirty work, and I really, really like the idea of They Might Be Giants doing dirty work.
That would sound so awesome.
So they have so many. They have their divorce anthems. Now they just need to get the cheating anthems in there.
And the Coke anthems.
And then one of them needs to write like a super, super obnoxious autobiography about how he doesn't like any music past like, I think like 1975 or something like that.
Oh, perfect. I feel like that is such a character that Flans would embody perfectly. Like those are the kind of like bastard characters that he's really good at inhabiting for like one song.
Oh man, I'm making a petition for Flans to write a song about Donald Fagen now. I need to hear it.
Perfect. It'd be perfect. I feel like I just end up like... I feel like the Might Be Giants fits a lot more comfortably into like the 90s alt-rock scene than like a lot of people who are really into the 90s alt-rock scene would admit. Like you could put They Might Be Giants right next to REM, no problem. Like they could be the same band. They have so much in common.
I think we talked on our Lincoln episode about how like They'll Need a Crane is basically just like a Smiths song.
Yeah.
Like right down to like the Johnny Marr guitar part. It's like, yeah, I totally see what you're saying, man.
God, that is a Johnny Marr guitar, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm sure we said this on the episode, but as we'll frequently say, the second we podcast, everything that we say leaves our head. Like that we are actually just exercising demons by recording a podcast.
You have two demon Johns inside both of you, and you have to just
let them out every once in a while.
Yeah,
podcasting
and whenever
leaving the body.
And I feel like with a lot of people, I think Greg was saying this, he always kind of just like picks a certain song that's like one of their most well-known songs, and that's how he kind of introduces like other people who maybe don't know as much about They Might Be Giants.
Well, yeah, the approach I feel like definitely just depends on like who you're approaching, because I know a lot of people are really like, if they're really into something, they're just gonna like start throwing it at people. But I feel like you have to have a very individualized approach to showing people music, or else they're just gonna be like, oh, it's that weird shit you're into. Like if you could just kind of just show, if you know what they already like, you can definitely find something that's similar to that. Mm-hmm. So you gotta find that one person who's gonna get hooked on like Another First Kiss or something. If you want to test how much they can stand the nasally vocals, you start them off with Bangs.
Ooh,
you get that like real nasal sound in there.
You could also just like say fuck it and like go with like Boat of Car or something and be like, this is what all of their songs sound like.
Despite the fact that this person only sings on this one.
Or you could do... You could do Chest Piece Face and Spider. Spider is...
But yeah, also like any early Flans track.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like User's Guide User's Guide is actually a very good compilation to... Like, it examines the breadth of their musical styles while also containing, like, all their main singles.
Yeah, because it's Spider's on User's Guide,
Spider's on User's Guide, but then also, like, Dr. Worm and Boss of Me are on there, and those aren't on any studio albums. So, like, it's the easiest way to get, like, two of their, like... I honestly just show everyone Dr. Worm. If they don't like it, then they don't deserve it. If you don't like if you cannot jam to Dr. Worm, then get the hell out of my face.
They should make a shirt that says that.
I'll make my own shirt.
I always say, because I'm 20, so it's I always have to go with Hot Dog from Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. I go, yeah, this is my favorite band, and that usually pulls the weirdest looks.
Yeah, I mean, it's
that's like their number one song on streaming, right?
I think it's like, I know, not anymore.
It's up
still there. It's still Istanbul, but I think it was in the top 5 for a long time. Because I know stuff is way
like really high on TikTok or really high on Spotify because of TikTok. I think I remember reading that recently. It's like it's used in a lot of memes.
Yeah, and I think Stuff is Way is still number 3 on Spotify.
That's the one I was thinking of.
Yeah, because I think it's still Istanbul and Birdhouse at number 1, and I think Dr. Worm and Particle Man.
Dr. Worm is so good. If you ever see them live, just hope they have horns with them, because I feel like they have Kurt with them almost all the time now. So you're pretty likely to get Dr. Worm if he's there.
I checked the set list from the last time they came to Cleveland, which is like the closest city to me, and they played a song called Nowhere, which is the song I really want to see live. So I'm like, damn it, they're probably not gonna play it this time.
They definitely check the set list now. They'll try not to repeat songs when they come back.
And I mean, did they do any? Because I know they are also known for like just really off the wall covers, mostly picked by Flans. Did they do any covers that stood out to you guys when you saw them live?
I'm trying to remember what they...
The only cover they did was New York City, if that counts.
It definitely counts.
Yeah.
I feel like they did like a bunch of like, I'll sing like the chorus of this song and then move to another thing within another song, and I can't remember what song that is that they do that. Where they just kind of like just do like a covers jam almost. But most of the time it's been like, I could literally pull up the set list from when I've seen them on This Might Be a Wiki, because I have like all the shows I've been to listed. Because that's a thing you could do on the wiki, which I love.
And I think I've heard them do it for Particle Man, like when Linnell sang The Sign by Ace of Base, and I was like, this is the most 90s thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I don't think there's many covers in the sets that I've seen them.
I was just curious because I also know that, like, technically their most famous song is a cover.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I remember reading about. Have you read the 33 1/3 book about Flood?
I have not.
I'd highly recommend picking it up because those things are only like $10, and you can get them at most record stores. If not, then, Amazon or whatever. But they have a whole bit about how the reason why they have those covers in the first place is because they were like very early in their career. They only had the self-titled and Lincoln under their belt, both of which are very short albums. And they had like 2.5-hour sets to fill. So they're like, well, we need a hell of a lot more songs than we currently have. And I really think it's fascinating, the covers that they chose to make the main part of their repertoire.
Yeah, because it's like that. It's like Why Does the Sun Shine? I'm struggling to think of other ones right now for some reason. The Bills one. Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, Bills is recent. And then like New York City was like well after this era, mostly because the song didn't actually come out till 93.
They do that Chumbawamba song too.
God, yeah, they're tough thumping cover vocals.
Yeah, that AV Club video is great. I hate that song,
but I love their version.
Now we just need They Might Be Giants to cover the Chumbawamba's Margaret Thatcher EP.
Ooh, no.
Probably not, but it'd be funny.
For some reason, I had like a passing thought that if they just covered like Move Bitch by Ludacris, because I forget what song you said of theirs that was essentially just that song.
Oh, I remember this. What one was it?
God, why can't I remember this at all?
It was either on John Henry or Apollo.
Give me like 5 seconds.
Yeah, and then I had the thought, I was like, what if they just did a cover of Move Bitch by Ludacris? Because I feel like that could be amazing with like Flansburgh singing.
I can't imagine, like, I know they've said bitch in songs before, but I can't imagine them saying it that much. They would definitely be doing the censored version.
Yeah.
So move and then a pause.
I think it might have been AKA Driver.
That's what it was. I knew it was a song with driving in the title.
Good old classic NyQuil Driver.
That's so good. And compared to like other bands you enjoy, maybe not on like a similar scale, like how do They Might Be Giants stick out when compared to like your other musical tastes?
They Might Be Giants is like for Trevor, you go first.
This sounds like a negative thing, but I feel like some of the music I listen to is a little more cooler than They Might Be Giants. Like I grew up listening to a lot of like, Pitchfork approved indie hipster kid shit, which They Might Be Giants is decidedly not. And maybe it's also
they hated the Else.
Yeah. Also, a lot of the stuff I listen to is maybe like a little more easy to enjoy on a casual level, where as with They Might Be Giants, like I've said, a lot of the stuff that I get out of it is like in an academic sense.
They Might Be Giants is like, I will, even if like it changes over time, like I might have a different favorite album this week. I might like be listening to another band a little more another week, but like They Might Be Giants, I'll just always call my favorite band, because if I'm trying to like think of ranking everything objectively, they always just climb to the top of the pile. Like I've seen other bands live more times, but that's mostly because like it's easier to see Canadian bands live when you live in Southern Ontario than it is to see They Might Be Giants. Mm-hmm. But like, I wouldn't say that I proportionally like Born Ruffians 2.5 times more than They Might Be Giants, because I've seen them 10 times and I've seen They Might Be Giants 4 times.
Yeah, I feel like my music taste used to be a lot cooler, and then I got into They Might Be Giants.
The thing is you can also, if you branch out for people who are into They Might Be Giants, like there's a couple people in the miscellaneous tea group, you'll get into some real cool stuff. Like there's a lot of crossover between like They Might Be Giants and like 80s post-punk, and that's like all XTC. Really cool stuff. And that's stuff that They Might Be Giants were into, and it's stuff that you can get into. I mean, like, if you just follow the thread of James K. Polk with Julian Coster, you can get into the music tapes, which are pretty cool, and then you can get into to Neutral Milk Hotel, who are really cool.
Yeah, I did the reverse thing where I got into all the music I was supposed to get into in college and high school, and then now I'm getting into the music I should have gotten into in high school and college.
Yeah, it'll happen.
Yeah, and I always see them lumped with, and especially because I know Spotify does like that algorithmic kind of like mix for each user.
Yeah.
And my They Might Be Giants playlist is always it's either with comedy rock on like some weeks it'll just be more comedy, which it's always really jarring to see that placed with them. But then other times it'll be XTC or Oingo Boingo. Those are the two bands I see.
Oh yeah, Oingo Boingo I could really see working. Like Devo is like one of the obvious things that just like they could be on a festival lineup together, and it wouldn't even seem unusual to me. It'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oingo Boingo and They Might Be Giants, that makes sense.
The one other band I've always heavily associated with They Might Be Giants has been Ween, another like duo of
for sure
weird guys making like pretty strange like postmodern pop music.
They're just a lot more profane.
Yeah, they're the evil They Might Be Giants.
They really
and They Might Be Giants are the good Ween.
That's so true.
One day I said, I was like, I made a joke about this. I was like, They Might Be Giants like went to a private university and Ween went to a public university. That's like the difference between them.
Yeah. Ween are the public school kids.
They really are. I forget what Ween said about They Might Be Giants. I think Greg said it. It's like they called him like just like they make music that's like too smart, like almost something like that.
Yeah, no, that's I saw someone describe them as like, oh no, it was like a small, I think it was an Onion piece that was like They Might Be Giants. No, that was Weird Al. I was trying to think. It was like a behind the music thing. It was basically like a joke about that. Oh no, though it was They Might Be Giants because it talked about John Linnell's addiction to Tetris. I think that was The Onion anyway.
Was it the one where it was like talking about the behind the music, like didn't have enough like?
Yeah, but it's like I've also seen that with Weird Al, so like I've seen that joke enough times that I confuse them in my head. But it's like all their fans are computer programmers with pocket protectors.
Wow, that's accurate. And because when I started listening to They Might Be Giants, I like didn't really notice a difference between the John's writing. I kind of just thought of them as like a collective monster. And did you guys like, was there a point where you started noticing differences between like Flansburgh and Linnell's writing?
It took doing the podcast for that to happen to me. Like it wasn't until like I sat down with like the first album, looked at it like on a track by track basis, saw who all the writers were, that I started to notice like the patterns that emerged like when it came to each guy and like the specific like way they both tackled songs.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to, like, I have to approach it from the perspective of I know who's writing the song and then I work backwards to try to like, categorize them each in my mind. But I mean, it took me several years to even be able to tell their voices apart. I'm very, very bad with that, especially when they're both nasally. Like they fit a very similar vocal profile. Like I can fully tell them apart now, but especially because like they'll do voices. Like they're not necessarily even singing in their own voice on it, especially some of the earlier songs where they like kind of inflect that country twang on one song precisely per album. like at that point it gets a little more muddled. But I kind of got more into the like being able to tell them apart more a lot later. Because I think Flansburgh writes a lot more literally a lot of the time. And Linnell is often more heady kind of stuff, but like at the same time you'll get like Can't Keep Johnny Down, which is a fairly literal song of John Linnell's. And also one of the ones they cuss in. You gotta love that.
I love that there's like a tag that's just bad words.
Yeah. You just get them all in one place. The tagging system on This Might Be a Wiki is perhaps too good.
Do you guys have a favorite tag?
Honestly,
I've always been a big fan of. Go ahead, Matt.
It's probably bad words for me. That one's just so funny.
I've always been a big fan of like Avoidance to Work, which is like a whole subgenre of Flan songs.
Yeah, he really hates, for someone who works as hard as he does, he hates work.
I kind of understand that. It's like hating work in like the Protestant work ethic sense and liking work in the actual production of something that you want to do sense.
Exactly.
I mean,
he hates like
hate
the
both
machine
varieties.
of work.
I mean, I've been trying to fill time just like doing like kind of busy work, and sometimes it's like if I find something that's like at least interesting for me in the moment, I don't mind doing it. But at the same time, it's like I avoid several categories of job applications because I'm like, there's no way I'm not going to just want to die doing that. So I'm glad Flan's found something that's like, fun to do at least. Another tag that I just really like, even though I never played Kingdom of Loathing, I really like that there's a whole tag of Kingdom of Loathing reference, but the way the tag is phrased makes it seem like They Might Be Giants are referring to Kingdom of Loathing rather than this is referenced in Kingdom of Loathing. And you could just tell it's one person on the dev team that's a big fan of They Might Be Giants, and probably that same person who created that tag and filled it out on the wiki.
Yeah, and I mean, Happy But Sad's always a really good one.
Oh, but that's their stock and trade.
Totally. I'm just trying to find what the really fun... The I Am tags actually might be my favorite, because it's just songs with I Am.
First person song. Oh, Criminal Activities, another good one.
That one is very good.
Because then at that point you have to get into the idea of what makes crime, and like you're really getting into like conceptual society when you're trying to talk about like what constitutes crime and criminal activity. It's like, just kind of a funny concept. Nice. Do they have to go and delete stuff when it becomes not a crime anymore? I hope so.
I can email them and ask.
Yeah, it's like, hey, why is this here? That's all legal now. Thanks.
Swing Feel's another good one. Drinking. I mean, I just looked it up, and She's Actual Size is surprisingly not under the criminal activity tag.
You might have to get it in there. That could be a mistake.
Yeah. I found an error in the system.
Yep, we must fix this one. I mean, that's the thing. It's a wiki. You can just do it.
I think one question. This is technically my last question on my cue cards, but it's very general and it's kind of also very hard to answer. But it's like, to you personally, what makes They Might Be Giants so special that, like, you decided to do a podcast about them?
Trevor, you go first.
I think something special about them is that they really are just kind of like, I view them as like the patron saints of like a very specific kind of like neurotic, artsy nerd that I've like spent a decent amount of my time like identifying as. You know, I feel like a lot of the stuff that they write and sing about frequently speaks like very directly to me.
I think I come from like a very similar standpoint, and it's also on top of that just how prolific they are, in that like you're not allowed to forget about They Might Be Giants. They have a new album out. They're touring again. Like, you literally can't forget. You don't have a chance to. Then you get like let's say you're into a band like My Bloody Valentine. They released their first album about 2 weeks after I was born. They released their second album when I was 22. Like, that's just not a band that's present in my life. Whereas They Might Be Giants have gone, like, maybe at most 3 years between albums. Because, like, I think... I don't want to go look at their discography and figure out what qualifies as an album versus an EP versus, like, a compilation versus a live album. But either way, the gaps are very small and infrequent. And the fact that they've always kind of been around and that they're cited as an influence for a lot of stuff I do like and listen to. Even now, like, I'll get into a new band and then I'll look at an interview by them. So, like, I'll start getting into, like, Parquet Courts. And then there's an interview with the lead singer of Parquet Courts where he thinks that They Might Be Giants is the most punk band he's ever listened to.
And he's right.
And, like, I feel like there's like a huge amount of, like, indie rock right now that owes a lot to They Might Be Giants. And, like, indie rock's a genre that, like, you know, I can give or take some days of the week, but it is producing a lot of stuff that I like. And They Might Be Giants are definitely one of the prime influences for a lot of people who are sticking that kind of thing out. The idea is, like, you can just do your weird thing and someone's going to like it. And then hopefully, I mean, not as likely anymore, but, like, at a certain point, you can make a living off that kind of stuff. And it's very inspiring in that way.
And the fact that they've just seemed so ahead of the curve on, like, so many things that became and then maybe went and then, like, are the now kind of industry, like, music industry standard things.
I feel like they had a lot of good collaborators at a lot of really crucial times. The fact that they, like, locked in a producer for, like, their first couple albums and then immediately locked in another producer who's, like, still producing them to this day. Like, having a go-to producer, even when you're, like, you know, going in and out of a record label, like, that's pretty key. They've always had, like, they've had a relatively stable band. Like, they've had the same lineup now since, like, 2005, whenever Marty Beller joined. Like a pretty long time. And, like, their guitarists have remained in the band, like, since the late 90s. Like, they've had, like, really stable touring bands. I feel like it's just, like, they're talented, but I think they had a lot of luck in their situation. Like, the fact that they are able to move into Brooklyn, whereas that's something that's just, like, you just don't do that now. You can't do it now.
You really can't. It's so expensive. And I mean, I think it was Anthony Fantano say, like, Dial-A-Song is basically proto music streaming.
Oh yeah.
That's very paraphrased, but I mean, like, and with their podcast and, like, them putting music online exclusively, it's just, they seem so, like, creatively.
Oh yeah. I mean, look at, like, the They Might Be Giants podcast launched in, like, 2005. The iPod launched in, like, 2004. The concept of a podcast followed shortly after that, and they were already making one. That's nuts. That is so ahead of the curve. like out of podcasts that are like really popular today that have existed for a while, like the longest ago any of them have started is like 10, 12 years. And like that podcast started 16 years ago. That's bonkers. And that's because they already had the basis of like releasing their music online, because they had the first like only released online album, like pre-mp3.com. They had Long Tall Weekend online. Embracing of technology, I think, is another really big thing that got them ahead, because like they got in early for a lot of this stuff. I just wish they like maintained their podcast feed better, but now there's other people who have done it, so that's good. There's still access to all that stuff if you just go looking for it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I was watching them on 120 Minutes from, I think it was 92. It was probably right when Apollo 18 was coming out. Mm-hmm. And, like, they were, like, fingertips. It's like, so I have this setting on my CD player called Shuffle, and it's like, I can't, like, I think about it, and I'm like, I can't even imagine that there was a time when you couldn't shuffle music in a non-manual, like, moving of the record or skipping through songs sense. And it was like, that was I mean, I don't know how like new of a function that was in 92, but I mean, they were already on top of it and wrote a killer song for it.
Yeah. They kind of gave up on the idea of it being like individual songs eventually, because, you know, they play them in the same sequence when they play it live now. They should mix it up though. It'd be very hard, but like they're playing songs backwards at this point, so I'm pretty sure they can literally do anything.
Yeah, I mean, Flansburgh saying, "Girl, you know it's true." I mean, that is just the best thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's all the questions I have for you guys. If you have anything else you'd like to add about They Might Be Giants, or anything?
I think we covered everything pretty well.
Yeah. I'm going to go edit that wiki now to make sure she's actual size is on the criminal activities tag.
Yeah, no, if it involves crime, you got to get it in there.
Because it's technically crime.
It's technically crime. And then as for us, you can find our podcast on Twitter at TMBG Fancast. You can find the podcast to listen to on Noisespace. It's noisespace.xyz, or XYZ if you're American. But like I make all the American hosts say XYZ, so it's my podcast website. So
I mean, Zed does sound cooler.
It does
as an
sound
American.
really cool, and yeah, you can listen to all the episodes there, including the episode of This Might Be a Podcast that we did with Greg, since our last episode was actually a crossover with his podcast. So he came on ours and we went on his. Basically, we will get back to it when when we're in the mood for it. That's like we didn't want to set a schedule on ourselves. Point. Yeah, exactly. It's like we were already doing the pod. We started it thinking like, oh yeah, we'll do one of these a month, and then eventually we got to the point where they'd released more albums than we'd released episodes, and then we kind of realized it's like, okay, we'll just we'll play it by ear. We'll do it when we feel like it.
They're trying to make sure they're like, we need to prevent them from making the episodes on time, release more albums.
Yeah, we'll have material forever. We will never run out of stuff to talk about for this podcast.
Exactly. And I can't wait to hear what you guys think about Mink Car, even though I know that's a ways away from where, or no, I don't think it's actually that far, because you guys stopped at Factory Showroom.
Yeah, we have like one episode or something to do before we get to it.
Yeah, unless we do some in like the late 90s EPs, which we could do for mini episodes, because like there's some good stuff going on in those.
There are.
Plus, a mini episode might be an easier way to get back into it. I think it's just Greg tired us out by making us do a 2-hour plus episode.
That was a real marathon.
It was a real marathon session.
Yeah,
and then we did the very long episode of his show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got in with Sense-Around, because it's like such an underappreciated track.
That was the first time I listened to it, and like now it's like maybe like a top 10 They Might Be Giants song for me.
Yeah, and I hadn't listened to it until I heard your guys' episode, and I was like, this song kills.
It not making the album will never make sense to me. It was definitely just a sequencing problem, though. They had nowhere they could put it in that sequence of songs that sounded right. And like I kind of get that, but at the same time, it's like, come on, make a song that makes it work.
Yeah.
At least it played for 5 seconds in a Power Rangers movie.
That's me with Weekday. I mean, I can't find any album to put it on. Like, I can't like take out a song and sub in that to have it make sense. But I'm just still mad that I'm like, really? This was saved for a compilation song so good. I don't care if it's like a minute long.
Amazingly, Weekday, it was covered by an artist named Logan Whitehurst, who I would always recommend anyone get into. There's, in fact, a podcast on Noisepace about all 6 of his albums, and he does a Weekday cover, and it fits right into an album. He made it work, mostly because his songs are sillier.
I will definitely have to check that out.